Hi, this is your Swapnil Bhartia, and we are back with our yearly video prediction series. And today we have with us once again Dimitri Vlachos, CMO at Spacelift. Dimitri, it's great to have you on the show.
Great to be here, Swapnil.
My pleasure. Of course, I'm going to ask you to share your predictions. But before that, please quickly remind our viewers what is Spacelift all about, especially when we look at 2026 and the problem that you are going to solve for customers this year.
So Spacelift, we're all about helping DevOps and platform teams deploy, manage, and automate, the management of their infrastructure. And when we look at kind of overall in 2026, one of the big things we see is that, it's getting harder and harder for platform teams to keep pace with developers when they have more and more, the speed at which they're developing code with AI assistance is just skyrocketing. And so we think it's a big year of how do you keep pace? That's really what we're about in 2026.
Excellent. Thank you. Now it's time for you to grab your crystal ball and share your top predictions with us.
Okay, so let's see, top predictions. I would say, one of them is that the, infrastructure teams are going to have to find a way to react to just the massive adoption we're seeing of AI in development. And so whether that's a different deployment option, because we believe that IaC alone, like traditional GitOps pipelines, is not enough to keep pace. It's an important piece, but that there needs to be the infrastructure teams themselves need to start looking at how can they adopt AI to keep pace. So that's one prediction. I think another prediction is, with all that and the need to go faster, governance and security are going to continue to be real pain points that platform and development teams need to balance. We've seen this, this is not a new trend, but we think it's one that actually increases in importance with the demands for more velocity. Governance becomes even more important to how do you actually go faster, but ensure you're not putting resilience, security, and reliability at risk. And then I think a third prediction for us is that much like we've seen in a bunch of other areas related to development and development processes, we think AI chat, like a natural language interface, is going to become a meaningful and important part of the day-to-day workflow of infrastructure, platform and DevOps teams. So I think those, when we look at top predictions, I think that's certainly the top three. I see one other is that we see platform and in platform teams and companies in general, ones that are just starting out in this automation kind of, how do I automate all my cloud infrastructure? The traditional way of looking at Terraform HCL is like this building block. We see more and more companies thinking about, well, that's great, but how can I actually, is there a way for me to accelerate where I don't even have to, learn HCL or IaC? I can find another way to automate. So I think those are the four predictions we really see is coming up in 2026.
Thank you for sharing these predictions with us. What are some of the biggest challenges or bottlenecks you feel organizations will face this year?
Some of the biggest challenges, I think one thing is as they do look to go fast, like how do you retain control? And so whether it's allowing people to prototype faster, but then when it comes to production, how do you still have control? Like that's a type of challenge. How do platform and DevOps teams experiment more without putting themselves at risk? I think that's a real challenge. I think, how do you kind of stop being perceived at least as a roadblock to engineering and to development as they're accelerating the way they develop? There's already been some tension, in this area, but as a challenge for kind of platform and DevOps teams, how do you keep pace and really not be perceived as a bottleneck? I think is a big challenge. So I'd say a final challenge that we see is like, how do you use governance not just for the way you're going to deploy? There's been a lot of focus historically on policies and guardrails for deployment. How do you bring that same structure to how you're going to use AI in your infrastructure? So whether that's prompt guidelines, whether that's the clear guidelines of where you're going to use AI and not, but we think that's an important piece of not just, hey, we're going to use AI, but where you're going to use it, how you're going to use it, and how do you have clear guidelines? Because for each company, they're going to be a different kind of path, but we think that's a really important piece as well.
Excellent, thank you. And what are some of the biggest opportunities that will arise this year? Because a lot is changing, as you also mentioned. AI is also becoming more and more dominant.
So I think the big opportunities are, what are ways that platform and DevOps team can actually start to look at a way to not just be only focused on traditional GitOps and IaC? How do they look at different deployment models to have the ability to actually experiment and deploy very quickly with guardrails, but in areas where it's not production, they can let experimentation happen, move fast, but then when it comes to production, bring that level of rigor that needs to happen. So it's kind of flex and go fast where you need, but be more rigorous when you're actually going to deployment. So that's one area we think is big opportunities. We also see opportunities to start to use, AI assistants to better understand your infrastructure. Because let's be clear, a lot of times you deploy, there's a long history of what's been deployed, and really understanding what's there already and where things are going to fit in can be quite hard. So how can you start to leverage tools like AI and the power of that to understand what's deployed, understand what's going to fit best into your environment? Think of it almost as an assistant to designing, understanding, and architecting your infrastructure. So that's a huge opportunity. There's both the ability to understand and kind of read-only access, if you will, and then the actual ability to deploy and go faster. So we think that's a huge opportunity as well. And then we definitely think that the opportunity to look at, how do you look as a force multiplier across all your team of AI to make you as a platform and DevOps team keep pace? Like, that's a huge opportunity. So those are huge opportunities we see in 2026.
What is your actionable advice to enterprise leaders? What should they start doing now to be ready?
So I think there's two or three things. First is, what are the guardrails you want to put in place? Governance, we talk a lot about when it comes to actual deployment of infrastructure. But as you're looking at trying to keep pace with development organizations that are just accelerating, what are the guardrails? Where do you want to actually increase your velocity, right? Where do you want to make trade-offs between speed and control? And so I think stepping back and really thinking about what's our approach to using this, not just diving in. So that's one. I think the idea of what's the intent of what you want to deploy, and then being able to review that. So, hey, do we want to go fast with experimentation, but go slow or slower, more rigorous with production? Do we want to use AI only really for understanding and designing, but not for actual deploying? Like, what's the guardrails and the structure you want to put around? I think that's really important as people, because let's be clear, when something goes down in the middle of the night, it's not the dev team that's getting called, right? It's the platform team, it's the DevOps team, it's the SRE team, it's the operations teams that are responsible. So really thinking through where you want to put new technology to work to accelerate, I think is important. So I think those are some of the actionable things we think of the steps you need to do to get ready to really accelerate.
What is going to be your, as well as Spacelift's, focus and priorities this year to help customers navigate this future?
So our focus this year is how do we bring, we released at the end of last year Intent, which is a natural language AI-based way to deploy infrastructure without having to create HCL or any code, like bypassing the whole code process. So we want to build on that. We think that's an important piece that fits into a lot of the challenges we've been talking about. We also think that bringing the ability to have an AI assistant that sits side by side with your team across every aspect of managing your infrastructure, whether that's visibility and understanding, whether that's building policies, whether that's actually deploying, or whether that's designing. So you'll see a lot of focus from us in that area, and not just to bring AI to say AI, how do we actually build a structure and an approach to modern infrastructure automation that allows you to, have the rigor of IaC and GitOps, because we think that's an absolutely critical piece, while complementing that with AI and supplemental intelligence to go fast when you need to. So that's where we're going to be investing a lot moving forward.
Dimitri, thank you so much for joining me and sharing these predictions with us. And as usual, I look forward to our next discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Swapnil. Always great talking to you.